So this is going to be our second project. We're going to turn a bottle of olive oil into this beautiful aquarium for a magic fish. And so we're going to do all the little textures, paintbrushes, and details to kind of create this effect of the fish being inside the bottle. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to need 2 photos for this. We're going to need our olive oil bottle, and we're going to need our beautiful fish. So the first thing I want to go ahead and do is cut out our fish. We're going to want to bring that into our olive oil photo. So it's going to unlock this layer, and there's a couple ways we can select this one. This might be easy. It's a very simple background. So I'm just going to go ahead and see if I can't take my magic wand tool and go ahead and click anywhere and get a perfect selection just like that. So I'm going to want to reverse the selection because this is selecting all of the background. So I'm just going to go select and then inverse. There's also a little keyboard shortcut that you can memorize. So I'm just reversing out that selection, and it seems I just need to clean that up a little bit. I'm going to just take my polygon lasso tool and do subtraction. I just need to subtract a few of these little selections it kind of accidentally made, and then we can clean up this a little bit later. Let me add, it's better to over select and cut out than under select and cut, they have things missing from your fish. So I'm just going around with the polygon lasso tool, and I'm just gonna do some manual cutouts. Of course, I can always do select and mask and smooth out my selection a little bit. I think that'll be okay for where it's gonna go in the glass. The fish is not going to be zoomed in a significant amount, so that a little bit more of a rough cutout than I usually like, but that's okay. I'm going to go select and mask. I'm just going to smooth out my cutout just a little bit. I'm going to feather it just a tiny bit and maybe shift my selection inward a little bit to make sure I don't bring any of that white background with me. So I'm going to go ahead and copy. So I'm just doing Command C, copy shortcut. I'm going to pop that into my olive oil. And let's first see how big this image is. 3, that's great. That's not going to mess up my computer at all. And I have a pretty great computer, but not everyone has, 36 megabytes of RAM, and it could really mess up your program if you're working with an image that's 6,000 by 6,000 pixels. It can get to a gigabyte in size very quickly in terms of just trying to save you space on your hard drive. Okay, so here is this. I'm going to go ahead and Command V. I'm going to paste that fish in. I'm going to go ahead and scale my fish down. I'm going to try to find the right placement for our fish. Don't want them to be too overwhelmingly big either. So maybe right about there might work. So now you can see the first problem we have. Right now it looks like he's floating in front of the glass, but he's not inside the glass. So I'm going to show you a couple of tricks where we can add some highlights on top of the fish to make it look like he's inside as opposed to just sitting outside of the glass floating. So now we're going to paint on the highlights with the brush tool. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer. This is going to be our highlight. I'm going to go ahead and drag that on the top over the fish. I'm going to grab our brush tool over here, and we're going to make sure it's a soft round brush. So it's going to have a soft feathered look. We don't want to make it too big. We just want a little kind of skinny highlight that goes down over the fish and in the water to kind of bring that fish inside the glass, or at least give that effect. So we're just going to draw down. We're going to apply a blending mode. So you're going to use blending modes a lot when you do photo manipulations. Let's try a soft light. So that's not going to wash out the fish. If we were just do a normal and then reduce the opacity, kind of gives that washed out look, which is not good. But if you do a blending mode and go down to soft light, it gives you the highlight but without washing out the fish or looking super obvious. So now just with that one change, it kind of brings the fish inside a little bit. We're going to also do some other things to help bring that fish inside. So next we're going to change the water, or the oil in this case, into water. So there's a couple things we need to do. So I have my layer, my olive oil layer selected, and I'm going to want to isolate this bottle. So now we need to desaturate the bottle to get rid of any traces of that green olive oil. So we're going to desaturate before we start to paint on our blue water. So there's a couple ways to desaturate, and there's one special way we're going to do it to retain kind of the lightness and the highlight of the bottle. So there's a couple ways we could do this. We can go to Image, Adjustment, we could desaturate. but you notice how dark it makes everything. You kind of lose all the highlights of the photo. So we're going to go back and try something a little bit different. You can go to hue and saturation and you can desaturate it this way, but you still have the same issue. So there's one more thing we can do. We can go to image adjustments and we can go to vibrance. So I'm going to go ahead and click on vibrance and we're going to reduce the saturation that way. So you notice how it desaturates it, but it also retains a lot of those beautiful highlight colors. It doesn't make it really bright. So I just went to vibrance and reduce saturation that way. So now we're ready to paint on our blue water. Before we paint on our water, I wanted to clean up our fish selection a little bit. It's a little rough here at the bottom and I really wanted to make that look smooth. We could take the eraser tool and we could try to manually smooth out that selection by using a soft round brush, or we can take the eyedropper tool, do a little trick. We can go ahead and sample this white color right here, just sampling the color that we want to erase, and we can go up to select and then go down to color range. So it's going to select everything in this particular color range. We can adjust the fuzziness to make it accurate or a little less accurate, a little less range, selection, go down to image. So just kind of, you don't really have to change a whole lot, just kind of mess with the fuzziness and see how much you want to select. And sometimes this is mostly trial and error. So go ahead and click OK, and you notice how it selected a lot of that white stuff out. But see, it's going to select a lot of white stuff in the fish that we like, that we don't want to erase. We don't want to erase that. So if I click on delete, it erases that and it leaves these holes in there. All we want is this to be trimmed off. So we're going to keep that selection, but we're just going to deselect the rest of the selection. So I'm just going to take my polygon lasso tool, or I can even take my lasso tool and go ahead and get my subtraction selection, and I'm going to subtract anything I don't want to disappear in the fish, right? So I do want all of that bottom area to go away, but none of the top. So now I'm going to press delete, and it deleted that little bit of that color range, and look how smooth that cutout looks. Does that not look really smooth? So that's kind of an easy way to smooth it all out for you. So I just went up to select, color range, and I isolated that white part I wanted to trim off, and then just deselected anything I didn't want to cut off up here. So now comes the really fun part. We get to paint water onto this bottle. So we're going to create on the very top layer. Actually, I think highlight's going to remain on top, so it's going to be above the fish. We're going to add a new layer. That's going to be our water that we're painting on. And we're going to get our paintbrush tool. Let's go ahead and grab our paintbrush tool right here. And we are going to select, we're going to continue to use the soft round brush. We're going to get a nice big brush. We're going to use 300 pixels for this. So it's nice and round, and we're going to pick a nice, beautiful watercolor. So this is where we're going to have to experiment a little bit to find the right shade. We can make it more purple or make it more light. I think more realistic water, especially in a bright environment like this, is going to be more in the lighter sky blue color. So that's what we're going to trial with. So I'm going to go ahead and just make sure we're at 100% opacity. And there's one more step. So we have our soft brush on. We want to put a blending mode on this entire layer before we start painting, so we can see how the water's going to look as we paint it. So instead of normal, we're going to go down and try soft light. So this is going to be a blending mode that's going to allow, it's going to paint on and make it look more realistic. So I'm going to go ahead and paint our color on. Let's make sure we're at 100% opacity. Going to see our water coming to life a little bit. If you go outside, don't worry, we can always just use the eraser tool and get it color. So you can already see kind of a nice layer. You can also make it more rich. You can even add another layer and paint on another color by using the soft light. Or we can paint on top of the same layer, maybe add a deeper color, certain areas, kind of add a richness to it. Just kind of painting on. You can continue to add color and depth, adding more than one different color. You notice how I used about 3 different shades of blue to paint. I'm still on the same layer and just doing a soft light brush. So now one thing we need to do is we need to take our eraser tool, okay, make that a big soft brush. We're just going to erase, actually maybe not quite as big, just kind of erasing anything that went over. And so here's the trick. So we want to erase anything in this bottom area because this is just part of the thickness of the glass. That's not going to actually have water in it. So we're going to want to delete that. And that kind of adds a little bit more of a realism to everything. So kind of knowing how reflections work, shadows work, kind of helps in doing photo manipulations. But that is the start of the glass, so you will see water there, but not down there. Same with this very edge right here. We don't want it to go all the way over. And I think I have some blue that's spilled over. I'm just cleaning up my selection. Same thing with this top. So that's not going to always reflect the blue. Okay, now we have our water. And to kind of add a little more realism and to help bring that fish inside the bottle a little bit more, we're going to paint on some bubbles, but we're also going to bring in a space star texture to kind of add a little bit of element of bubbles to kind of bring some depth to this water. Because right now it's just static water. You can't tell there's anything in it because there's no bubbles, there's no waves, there's no action. So we're going to add that next.